I believed he was going to rape me. I tried to yell for help. When I did, Brett put his hand over my mouth to stop me from yelling. This is what terrified me the most and has had the most lasting impact on my life. It was hard for me to breathe, and I thought that Brett was accidentally going to kill me. Both Brett and Mark were drunkenly laughing during the attack.
I'm not questioning that Dr. Ford may have been sexually assaulted by some person in some place at some time. But I have never done this to her or to anyone. That's not who I am. It is not who I was. I am innocent of this charge.
Good evening and welcome to this MetroFocus special, The Clash on Capitol Hill over the Kavanaugh controversy. I'm Jack Ford. Today is an historic day in Washington and on Capitol Hill. Supreme Court Justice nominee Judge Brett Kavanaugh faces accusations of sexual misconduct, now not by one, but by three women. Today, Judge Kavanaugh faced off against the first woman who has since come forward, Professor Christine Blasey Ford. The professor alleges that Kavanaugh sexually assaulted her at a party in the Maryland suburbs during the early 1980s. The mood on the Hill, tense, the stakes quite high. One of the lawmakers watching the events unfold is New York Representative Nita Lowey, and she joins me now. Representative Lowey, it's nice to have you here with us. And in addition to your role now, you bring a sense of history for us, in the sense that you were first elected in 1988. You were there in 1991 when the Clarence Thomas, Anita Hill hearings took place. I want to ask you about some parallels on that in a moment. But first, I'd like to get your sense. Here you are, a fairly new congressperson in 1991. The hearings were before that different from what they have become. Indeed, some people would be surprised to know that in the past they were very collegial indeed until the modern era. Nominees themselves didn't even have to appear in front of the Judiciary Committee. All of that changed 1987 with Judge Robert Bork's contentious hearing and his rejection. And then here you are as a new congressperson in 1991. So my first question to you is, looking back at that, what do you remember thinking about this hearing and how it had changed so dramatically into the realm of personal confrontation and personal allegations?
I remember very clearly when 7 of us took a walk over to the Senate, knocked on the Senate door because they were having a caucus meeting. And we were absolutely shocked when Senator Mitchell would not let us come in to talk to the members of the caucus. We were enraged that Anita Hill was not given respect. It was an all-men committee, Democrats and Republicans, and she finally was allowed to speak. But frankly, there was no understanding of what sexual accusation really means to the victim, to those who are suffering because they were not believed.
Do you think there's any better understanding now with the passage of some 27 years? Do you think we've made any progress in that realm?
I certainly think we made a lot of progress. However, Professor Ford is testifying. To come forward takes a great deal of courage because it brings back all the memories and the pain and the suffering that she went through. And yet, when an appointment to the Supreme Court of the United States of America depends not only on intelligence, but credibility, character, understanding, a person who has to make a whole range of decisions, when they want to rush this through without, and they meaning the Republicans, want to rush this through without an FBI investigation, I am truly, truly shocked. If there are those Republicans who don't believe her, they should get an FBI investigation. But from my perspective, understanding that it takes such guts to come forward now, come here to Washington, and she expressed her fear and her hesitation. Why can't they take a little more time and do it correctly.
Let's talk a little bit about the parallels, because I've seen you made some comments about the parallels between 1991, those hearings, and the hearings that are taking place today. And let's start focusing on the women who were involved. What parallels do you see between Professor Anita Hill and now Professor Ford?
First of all, the real contrast is who was asking the questions. On the Democratic side today, there are women and men who respect her point of view, are listening, and want to get to the truth. And that's why they're asking for an FBI investigation. Frankly, at the time of Clarence Thomas, when Anita Hill was actually allowed to testify, it was all men. They were very rude. Many of them didn't pay any attention. And there were clear questions in my mind whether they were really listening and understanding what sexual abuse was all about.
In looking at this hearing, now I covered the Clarence Hill, Anita Thomas hearing. So every moment of those days I was involved in covering it. And it doesn't seem like it was that long ago, quite honestly. But looking at this hearing, at least in terms of the optics, I'm not talking about the politics here, but at least in terms of the optics, the manner in which questions are being posed, the attitudes of the questioners. As you mentioned, there is a professional prosecutor who's doing all the questioning for the Republican side. The Democratic senators are offering up their own statements and questions. I'm struck by what appears to be a bit of a difference. Do you also see a difference in tone and attitude? I'm not talking about politics, but tone and attitude in the questioning?
A huge difference. There is no comparison. And the woman prosecutor is, the person who's asking the questions for the Republican is very respectful, asking the questions in a cautious way, very different from the way both Democrats and Republicans, frankly, during Anita Hill hearing, asked the questions.
So it sounds like some lessons were learned in the Senate. Again, I'm not talking about the politics and what ultimately is going to be the result here, but at least some lessons having been learned in terms of the manner in which this should be done and the optics in which it should be done.
Oh, I think there's a greater understanding. And certainly Professor Ford is a very, very believable candidate coming before a believable witness, rather. And there is no question in my mind that the Republicans who are opposing her and still standing by Judge Kavanaugh are being very, very careful because they know the world is watching and understands the challenge that Professor Ford has during this grilling, during the questioning. And again, there is no reason in my mind why they couldn't take their time for an appointment to the highest court of the land, somebody who has to make judgments every day about a whole range of cases. They could have waited. Why letting her sit there? And why couldn't the Republicans understand that the Democrats should get all the time they need to ask the questions of Judge Kavanaugh to make sure that he is qualified, not just because of his degrees and his intelligence, but his understanding of people, women, and an issue such as this.
And do you see, in terms of parallels, we talked about the women who are involved. How about the nominees themselves? Do you see parallels between now Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, then the nominee, and currently Judge Brett Kavanaugh, in terms of backgrounds and how they have handled themselves in the face of this controversy?
Well, frankly, Judge Kavanaugh intellectually is a person that has earned respect. We don't understand what his personal views are, whether he's credible, whether he has character. But in terms of intellectual background, he certainly has had a career that's worthy of respect.
Well, Representative Nita Lowey, I want to thank you. Again, the sense of history, the sense of parallels, the background between the two, I think are certainly helpful for all of us in understanding as we follow this process along. So we really appreciate you taking some time, and what I'm sure is a busy day for you, and we'll look forward to talking with you again down the road. Thank you so much for joining us.